Hello and welcome. I'm Millicent Walker. Tonight, President Muhammadu Buhari deploys men of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps to schools in the northeast of the country. Troops arrest 12 herdsmen in Benue State, just as men of the Department of State Services arrest 5 men suspected to be terrorized in the north-central states of the country. Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi State sets up a commission of inquiry to probe the attack on 5 communities which left at least 12 people dead. Russian President Vladimir Putin wins the presidential election in a landslide victory with a mandate to lead his country for another 6 years. We begin tonight with news that President Muhammadu Buhari will no longer be attending the extraordinary meeting of African Union heads of state and government slated to hold in Kigali, Rwanda, March the 21st. In a statement signed by the Foreign Affairs spokesperson, Tope Elias Fatile, the president's trip was cancelled to allow Nigerian stakeholders more time to make input, while President Buhari would have, during the trip, signed the framework agreement for establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area, CFTA. The Federal Executive Council had on Wednesday, March the 14th, approved that Nigeria signed the framework agreement for the trade area. The Council had also approved that Nigeria expressed her interest in hosting the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The decision to establish the agreement was taken in 2012 by all heads of state and government of the African Union at the 18th Ordinary Session. And President Muhammadu Buhari has ordered the deployment of men of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps to secondary schools in the northeast. The directive, according to the Commandant General of the NSCDC, Muhammadu Abdullahi, is to provide more security to the state following the recent abduction of over 100 girls in Yobe State.
It's almost 1 month since over 100 girls were abducted in Dapchi, Yobe State. This issue has raised a lot of concerns, not just from government, but also from individuals and civil organizations. Now the federal government has taken a step further to avoid a recurrence by deploying men of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps to secondary schools in the northeast. The Commandant General of the NSCDC is shocked at what obtains at the Government Girls Secondary School, Gombe. The school has no perimeter fence despite being in existence since 1976.
Some of you, come.
The visit is an opportunity for the school to voice other concerns.
My call to the state government is to intervene, more especially in terms of feeding, since it is a boarding school. The students are supposed to be fed thrice if it is possible, and the fencing of the school to
What's his name? The team proceeds to Government Secondary School, Hong 1, where the NSCDC boss interacts with some students. He gives them the assurance that the government will ensure that their security is guaranteed.
The president has said we should come and provide security. What happened in Chibok and the petition should not happen here. That's why we have sent our men to come here and guard here. We have our men in front of your schools with their arms 24 hours. So that you will study under a very conducive and secure atmosphere. Your principal has told us the little problems you have. I'll make sure that it is addressed.
Actions like this to forestall a recurrence is the right way to go. The hope of the schools in the northeast is that the momentum of containing abductions is sustained.
The Nigerian army says 12 herdsmen have been arrested by troops in Benue State for allegedly destroying farmlands. The suspects were apprehended by the troops of 707 Special Forces Brigade during the visit of the Presidential Assessment Team to Mbeya, Yandev and Kambi wards of Benue State. Meanwhile, men of the Department of State Services have announced the arrest of some alleged criminally minded persons accused of terrorizing north-central states of the country. The suspects are accused of kidnapping, gun running and armed banditry with links in Plateau, Nasarawa, Taraba and Benue State. According to the DSS, the suspects are Jonah Abe, also known as Jonah Idi, and his driver, Agio Xavier, also known as Dan Wase, and another Lawal Ibrahim, Ado Saleh and Bayero Adamu. The DSS hints that the suspects, which have been on its wanted list for more than 10 years, have over the period aided criminal groups in several parts of the country. The governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, has promised to get to the root of the farmer-herdsman clash that claimed at least 12 lives in the state through a judicial panel of inquiry. 5 villages, all under Dekina and Bassa local government areas of the state, was attacked by suspected herdsmen earlier in the week over what was described as a reprisal attack. The situation forced residents to flee their homes for fear of further attacks.
The people in this community are farmers and have been living together peacefully as one until the 14th of March 2018 that they were attacked in the early hours by suspected herdsmen. This attack has left at least 12 people dead, while the injured ones are presently on treatment. Their homes, farmlands and properties have also been destroyed. Governor Yahaya Bello and some of his cabinet members are on an on-the-spot assessment visit to some of the troubled communities in Dekina and Bassa local governments, respectively. Those communities have no access roads, so it's a difficult task to get there. At the time, the governor and his entourage had to walk several kilometers to one of the communities. The shattered buildings, burnt motorcycles, bullet shells, and the graves were enough evidence to tell the story of what could have happened in this community. Governor Yahaya Bello addressed the people and the security agencies, promising that his administration will not relent in its efforts to secure the lives and property of the citizens in the state.
Judicial panel of inquiry is underway to ascertain the remote and immediate causes of this incident. So also, a particular team will be deployed immediately to ascertain the extent of damages with a view of at least giving some palliative measures so that our people does not suffer untold hardships.
A member of the community who spoke to Channels Television confirms the number of lives lost in the said attack.
12 lives were ascertained, but now we cannot tell those. We could not recover others, but we recovered 12 precisely.
The Chief of Staff to the Governor, Mr. Edward Onoja, gives assurance of new access roads before the end of the year.
They need certain infrastructure that had eluded them for 27 years, and His Excellency had committed to ensuring that those infrastructure begins immediately.
This attack is not the first, but what the people are asking for is for the government to live up to its promises of protecting lives and property.
An agreed definition of the term terrorism is needed for consensus on completing comprehensive convention against it. Well, this is a communique from the United Nations on terrorists in 2005, looking at what constitutes a group as terrorists. In Nigeria, the same consensus appears to be at the forefront, with many calling on the federal government to label herdsmen alleged to be responsible for hundreds of deaths in the northeast and north-central states, a terrorist organization like the indigenous people of Biafra and the Boko Haram. In this report, our correspondent Oreoluwa Shonibare examines what qualifies a group as a terrorist group in Nigeria.
What attributes does a group need to possess to be regarded as a terrorist organization? In present-day Nigeria, there have been various groups that have been categorized under this definition.
I want you to report this accurately.
There is the indigenous people of Biafra, otherwise known as IPOB, whose label as terrorists by the federal government came as a result of their secession plans from Nigeria. There are arguments over the swift pronouncement as some parties challenge its legality, especially as there has been no extreme violence recorded against the group, while others see the move by the federal government as a means to avoid a repeat of the 3-year civil war that almost tore the nation apart. Or maybe it did.
Them here, and instead of firing at people, right at this very spot.
Next is the Boko Haram group that is responsible for tens of thousands deaths and displacement of millions. Their activities earned them the award of the world's deadliest group in 2015. They're also responsible for the abduction of over 200 girls in 2014 and another 110 4 years later. There was some initial reluctance by the federal government to classify the group as terrorists, citing harassment of Nigerian travelers by U.S. immigration authorities. But the blood on their hands was far too much to ignore. In the end, the federal government gave in. But like the case of the Boko Haram, there appears to be a tepid approach by the federal government to place the invisible militia alleged to be attached to herdsmen who are accused of being responsible for killings in some states on the terrorist list, which has left many tongues wagging. Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka has joined the company of those urging the federal government to take the step and make the declaration.
We're speaking here of a president showing up at the arena of human desecration, not to shed any unctuous tears, but to read the Riot Act and give orders right on the scene of violation. Order his forces into action against the arrogant, bloodthirsty renegades of society who wallow in the blood of others, having been assured some way or the other of the cloak of impunity. We're speaking of the courage to decree such monsters terrorists.
So what will the federal government do in the face of the mounting pressure and obvious mayhem caused by the militia and others like it? Does it take more deaths and destruction to make the call? Ultimately, a decision must be made. Hopefully, it will be the right one. Orelu Ashonibare, Channels Television News.
The Nigerian Army has organized a town hall meeting with stakeholders in Taraba State to address continuous communal clashes between the House of Fulani and the Tibbs of Wukari local government area. The aim to find solutions to the issue, which has led to the loss of lives and property, rendering many homeless.
The Nigerian Army, in collaboration with the Taraba State government, other security agencies and community leaders, are at this meeting with a view to finding a way of promoting peaceful coexistence amongst the people. Setting the tone for the interaction is the Brigadier Commander, 23 Brigade of the Nigerian Army, Yola, Brigadier General Muhammad Bello. He leads the team from the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, for the meeting.
There is nothing as important as peace and security. Whatever you think you are getting out of insecurity, whatever you think you benefit because two people are fighting, I bet you will lose 1 million times that thing through insecurity. So don't ever think that insecurity and lack of peace is something that you should perpetrate.
Other stakeholders expressed their views on the peace project in the area and how to achieve it.
Lalle kasan nan ta zama cewa mutane ba za su iya zama ba sai da jami'an tsaro saboda rashin adalci da ke gudana daga shugabanni. Jama'a su yi magana mai kyau. Idan har za a yi sa'a a samu adalci daga shugabanni, talakawa a ba su abin da ya dace, insha Allah za a zauna lafiya.
These dangerous weapons that are flying about, how do they come in? Why do we have all borders, people all over, law enforcement agents? What are they doing there? And we have roadblocks all over the country.
I think most of what has been affecting us is that we are carrying the whole light of the whole thing. Our husband has been affected, our children has been affected, our women have been affected too.
The State Commissioner for Information, Mr. Anthony Damburam, assures the people of the Taraba State government's desire to ensure that peace is realized in the area.
One of the things that you raise is the issue of fairness and justice. Definitely, that is the direction His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Taraba State, has started already. Because the mantra that he started with is that give me peace and I will give you development.
The representative of the Aku Uka of Wukari, the paramount ruler of the Wukari chiefdom, also appeals for peace. It is hoped that the people will take advantage of this meeting to ensure that peace is realized in Wukari local government area.